You're a little late. This is Earth.
The alarm on the Vacner warship blinked red before anyone understood why. Commander Tholis Ram had served the Caldrian Union for 30 cycles and never once had a sensor array locked onto something it could not classify. Yet here it was, floating in the black just past the edge of the Sol system, a shape that made no sense. It was not a warship. It was not a mining rig. It was not even a proper station. The object drifted slowly, tumbling end over end, its hull scarred and patched in places with metal that did not match. Half of it looked ancient, rusted, held together with what the scanners guessed were welded plates. The other half glowed faintly with strange blue light, clean and new, as if two completely different eras of technology had been forced into a single machine. Tholis leaned over the display, frowning. Run it again. That can't be right. His science officer, a thin drayling named Sokka, tapped at the console with 3 long fingers. I have run it 4 times, Commander. The reading holds. This is a vessel built by hand. No fabrication drones. No printed hulls. Every weld. Someone did that with tools. The bridge went quiet. In the Caldrian Union, and in every other spacefaring nation they had ever met, ships were grown or printed, shaped by machines that never made mistakes. A ship built by hand, piece by piece, by living hands, was something no one in the room had ever seen. Species? Tholis asked. Unknown. No match in any database. Whoever built this either came from somewhere we've never charted, or, Sokka hesitated, or from somewhere we stopped watching a long time ago. That single thought hung in the air, uncomfortable and cold. There was an old rumor, whispered more than spoken, about a small blue world far out on the galactic rim. A world that 3 great empires had once agreed, quietly, to leave alone. Not because it was dangerous, because it was pitiful. A species too young, too violent, too fractured to be worth the trouble of first contact. The kind of world you simply marked as not ready and moved on from. No one had checked on it in over 200 cycles. Send the greeting protocol, Tholis ordered. Standard first contact. Peaceful approach. The message went out in a dozen frequencies, wrapped in soft light and gentle tones. The same greeting the Caldrian Union had used 100 times before with newly discovered peoples. It was designed to calm, to reassure, to say we mean no harm in a way that any thinking creature could understand. The response came back 17 seconds later. It was not words. It was not light. It was a single, short burst of radio noise, rough and unpolished, followed by silence. Sokka ran it through every translation matrix available. Nothing matched. It's not a language we know. But Commander, the signal pattern, it's almost mocking, like someone laughing at us. Tholis did not like that thought at all. He ordered his ship, the Ashen Veil, to hold position and observe. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The strange, patchwork vessel simply drifted, tumbling gently, its lights blinking in no clear pattern. Then, without warning, small hatches on its hull popped open, and a swarm of tiny drones spilled out into space. They were crude by Caldrian standards. Slow, clunky, built from salvaged parts, some of them clearly cannibalized from older, broken machines. And yet each one carried a tiny flag, a piece of cloth stretched over a wire frame, fluttering uselessly in the vacuum where there was no wind to catch it. They're waving flags at us, Sokka said, disbelief thick in her voice. In space, where there's no air. Maybe it's symbolic, Tholis offered. A gesture, something meant to be seen, not felt. One of the drones drifted close enough for a clear scan. Painted crudely on its side, in jagged letters no translator could parse, was a phrase repeated over and over on every single drone in the swarm. Sokka finally managed a rough guess at the meaning, cross-referencing ancient linguistic fragments buried deep in an old archive nobody ever opened. Best translation I can give. It says something like, "We see you too." Tholis felt a chill crawl up his spine, though he could not explain why. It should have been a harmless message. Yet the way it was delivered, tumbling and rough and utterly unafraid, felt less like a greeting and more like a warning. Before he could give another order, the sensors flared again. A new contact, larger this time, entering the system from a completely different vector, far faster than any known drive should allow. The Ashen Veil's system struggled to lock onto it, the numbers on screen shifting and correcting themselves as if the ship's own instruments couldn't decide what they were looking at. Report Tholi snapped. Unknown vessel, Commander. Larger than us. Engine signature is. It's not stable. It shouldn't be flying at all by our models, and yet it's here. Speed is dropping now. It's slowing down. On approach vector. Something about the way the strange ship moved bothered Tholis more than its impossible engines. It didn't creep in cautiously, the way any smart species would when meeting something new and unknown. It came in like it already knew exactly who was waiting and simply didn't care. Options? Tholis asked, though he already suspected the answer. We could retreat, Commander, said his tactical officer, a broad-scarred warrior named Duran, arms crossed. Report back. Let the Council decide how to handle first contact properly. Tholis considered it. Protocol demanded caution. Protocol demanded patience. But something in him, some old instinct built from years of reading unfamiliar signals, told him that turning away now would be the worst possible choice. If this was truly the forgotten blue world, waking up after 200 cycles of silence, then whoever met them first would decide the story that got told about this moment for the rest of galactic history. Hold position, he said finally. Open a channel. Let's try again, properly this time. And Sokka, Commander, give me everything we have on that blue world. Every rumor, every file, every scrap the old archives forgot to delete. I want to know exactly what woke up out here. Sokka's fingers moved fast across her console, and one by one, old files began to surface. Reports written centuries ago by explorers who never returned. Warnings scribbled in the margins of forgotten star charts. A single sentence, buried under layers of dust and neglect, repeated in more than one abandoned log. Asterisk, do not disturb what sleeps on the third planet. Tholis stared at those words for a long moment. Then he looked back at the view screen, at the tumbling patchwork ship and its handmade flags, drifting silently among the stars. Whatever had been sleeping, it was awake now, and it had been watching them long before they ever noticed it was there. The channel connected. Somewhere far across the void, a voice began to speak, calm and steady, in a language the ship's systems finally, painfully, started to translate. This is Earth, it said. You're a little late. This is Earth. You're a little late. The words hit the bridge of the asterisk Ashen Veil like a slap. Tholis Rem had prepared himself for confusion, for fear, maybe even for hostility. He had not prepared for a voice that sounded almost bored. Identify yourself, Tholis said, keeping his tone level. Captain Elena Cho, Earth Defense Fleet, Vessel Stubborn Mule. A pause, filled with the faint sound of someone chewing something. And before you ask, yes, that patchwork ship you scanned earlier is one of ours. Don't judge it by its looks. It's older than most of my crew, and it's still flying, which is more than I can say for a lot of prettier ships I've seen die. Sokka leaned toward Tholis and whispered, Commander, her biosigns show no elevated stress markers. She is completely calm. That, more than anything, unsettled Tholis. Every species he had ever met showed some fear during first contact. A racing heart, a shift in breathing, something. This human showed nothing at all, as if meeting an alien warship was simply another Tuesday. We mean no harm, Tholis said carefully. We detected your signal and wish to establish peaceful contact. Sure you do. Elena's voice carried a dry edge. Funny thing about peaceful contact, Commander, you lot marked us as unready 200 years ago and left a note telling everyone else to stay away too. We found that note, by the way, salvaged one of your old probes that crashed in Nevada back in the 20th century. Took us a while to translate it, but we got there eventually. Tholis felt his stomach tighten. That was supposed to be classified information, buried deep in ancient archives that no living being should have been able to access. That data was restricted, he said. Not restricted enough, apparently. A short laugh crackled through the channel. You want to know what it said? It called us promising but unstable. Said we needed another 500 years before we'd be worth talking to. Real generous of you. Duran, the tactical officer, finally spoke up, his voice low and suspicious. Commander, if they found our probe and decoded our archives, Their technology may be far more advanced than these readings suggest. This could be a trap. It's not a trap, Elena cut in, apparently hearing the transmission clearly. If it was a trap, you'd already be dead. We've had eyes on your ship since it entered the outer system. Every angle, every weak point in your hull plating. If we wanted this to go badly, Commander, it already would have. The bridge went silent. The Lease looked at Sokka, who quickly pulled up a defensive scan, checking their own ship's exterior. Sure enough, faint traces of unfamiliar energy readings lingered along several sections of the Ashen Veil's hull, patterns that hadn't been there an hour ago. Someone had scanned them thoroughly, without triggering a single alarm. How? The Lease said slowly. Did you do that without our systems detecting it? Same way we build spaceships out of scrap metal and still make it to the stars, Elena replied. We're not fancy. We're just stubborn. When you don't have the luxury of perfect machines building everything for you, you learn to do a lot with a little. Necessity's a hell of a teacher. The Lease thought of the old warning buried in the archive. Do not disturb what sleeps on the third planet. He was beginning to understand exactly what that warning had meant, and it terrified him more than any weapon could. We wish to speak with your leaders, he said, formally, to correct the mistake of the past and begin a proper relationship between our peoples. There was a pause, longer this time. When Elena spoke again, her voice had lost its dry humor, replaced by something colder and far more serious. Here's the thing, Commander. 200 years ago, your people looked at a struggling planet full of wars, disease, and desperate people, and decided we weren't worth the effort. You didn't help us. You didn't warn us about the dangers out here. You just left a note and walked away, like we were an experiment not worth finishing. Circumstances were different then, the Lease said, though even to his own ears, the excuse sounded weak. Sure they were. And in those 200 years, Commander, we didn't just sit around waiting for someone to come rescue us. We built our own path. Slower than you, messier than you, but it's ours. A soft mechanical hum crackled through the channel, followed by a low, deliberate warning tone. So before we talk about leaders and formal relationships, you're going to answer something for me first. Ask, the Lease said. That old note also mentioned something called containment protocols, should Earth ever advance faster than expected. Care to explain what exactly your people meant by that? The question landed like a blade. Tholis's mind raced back through classified briefings he had received years ago, vague mentions of contingency plans for unstable species, plans he had never fully understood and never questioned. He had assumed, like most officers, that such protocols were purely theoretical, dusty policies from a more paranoid era. I do not have full knowledge of those protocols, he admitted honestly. They predate my service. Convenient. Elena's tone was flat. Well, Commander, here's some free advice. My people have a saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You had 200 years to decide we weren't worth watching. We spent every one of those years learning how to survive without you. So forgive me if I don't exactly trust the first friendly voice that shows up the moment we start looking dangerous instead of pitiful. The Lease chose his next words with great care. What would you have us do, Captain Cho? Another pause. Then, quieter, almost thoughtful. Prove it. Prove you're not here because we're a threat you suddenly need to manage. Prove you're here because you actually want to know who we became while you weren't watching. Before the Lease could respond, new alerts lit up across the bridge. More contacts, arriving fast, spreading out around the edges of the system in a pattern that looked less like a welcome and more like a careful, practiced formation. Captain Cho, the Lease said, his voice tightening. More vessels just entered the system. Are these yours as well? A short, humorless laugh answered him. No, Commander. Those aren't ours. A brief pause, filled with the sound of rapid commands being issued somewhere on the other end of the channel. Looks like word about Earth waking up traveled faster than we expected. And judging by their approach vectors, I don't think they're here for a friendly chat either. The Lease stared at the growing cluster of new signals on his display. Unfamiliar ships pouring into the system from 3 separate directions at once, and understood, with sudden and complete clarity, that first contact with Earth had just become something far more dangerous than anyone on either side had planned for. 3 fleets, 3 different empires, none of them Caldrian, all converging on the same forgotten blue world at the same time. The Elise Rim watched the sensor readings multiply across his display, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something close to panic. The Varaxi Dominion approached from the outer rim, their ships built for war and nothing else, hulls bristling with weapon arrays. From the opposite direction came the Thren Collective, cold and calculating, their fleet moving in perfect synchronized formation, never a single ship out of place. And from below the ecliptic plane, quiet and almost invisible until they were nearly on top of the system, came the ships of the Ashvar Concord, a species known for taking what they wanted and asking questions only after the fact. They all detected the same signal we did, Sokka said, her voice tight. The moment Earth's transmissions crossed a certain strength threshold, half the galaxy noticed. 200 years of silence, the Elise murmured, and the moment they finally speak up, everyone comes running. On the open channel, Elena Cho's voice returned, sharper now, all humor gone. Commander, I need you to listen carefully. We've dealt with the Varaxi before. Small skirmish, about 40 years back, out past our asteroid belt. They tested us. We didn't back down. They didn't like that. You fought the Varaxi Dominion and survived? Durin's voice held open disbelief. Survived, and then some, Elena said. Didn't win outright. But we made it expensive enough that they left and never came back for a rematch. Until, apparently now. The Elise ran the numbers in his head. The Varaxi Dominion fielded some of the most heavily armed vessels in known space. If a young, technologically unpolished species like Earth had genuinely stood their ground against them, even in a small skirmish, that alone explained why old Cauldrian files had once flagged this planet as unstable. Unstable wasn't the right word, the Elise realized. Unbroken was closer to the truth. Captain Cho, he said, what is your intention here? 3 fleets converging on your system is not something even we can help you survive. Didn't ask for your help, Commander. A short pause, filled with the muffled sound of orders being given somewhere behind her. But since you're here, and since you clearly want something from us, maybe it's time we all found out exactly what Earth became while everyone else assumed we'd stay quiet and pitiful forever. The Varaxi fleet broke formation first, 3 heavy cruisers peeling off toward Earth's position, weapons already charging. No hailing signal, no warning, just an old grudge finally coming due. They're not stopping to talk, Sokka said. Commander, should we retreat to a safe distance? The Elise hesitated. Protocol demanded neutrality in conflicts that did not involve the Cauldrian Union directly. But something in him, the same instinct that had told him not to turn away earlier, told him that whatever happened in the next few minutes would matter far beyond this one system. Hold position, he said. Full sensors. I want to see this. The Varaxi cruisers opened fire the moment they came into range, a barrage of plasma lances aimed directly at the tumbling, patchwork ship that had first caught the Ashen Veil's attention. For one terrible second, the Elise was certain he was about to watch an entire species get erased in front of him. Then something happened that no sensor reading could fully explain. The old ship didn't dodge. It didn't retreat. Instead, dozens of hidden panels across its scarred hull snapped open at once, and a storm of countermeasures erupted outward, not advanced shielding technology, but sheer overwhelming volume. Clouds of reflective chaff, decoy drones, and small defensive charges detonating in perfectly timed patterns that scattered the incoming plasma fire into harmless directions. That's not advanced technology, Durin said, stunned. That's just a lot of cheap tricks, executed perfectly. Exactly, Elena's voice cut in, and for the first time, there was real pride in it. We don't have your fancy shields or your perfect fabrication drones, Commander. We have 300 years of every war, every disaster, every hard lesson our own planet ever taught us, compressed into whatever hardware we could scrape together. You want to know what makes Earth dangerous? It's not our weapons. It's that we've never once had the luxury of giving up. More human ships emerged from hidden positions around the system, vessels that had been sitting dark and silent, using nothing but old rock and debris fields for cover. They had been there the entire time, the Elise realized. Watching, waiting, letting the Ashen Veil and the Varaxi Dominion both walk directly into a trap that had been set long before either of them arrived. The battle that followed was chaotic and brutal, nothing like the clean, calculated engagements Tholis had studied in his training. Human ships took hits that should have destroyed them and kept firing anyway, patched together with makeshift repairs mid-battle. Small fighter craft, barely larger than shuttles, darted between the massive Varaxi cruisers, striking at weak points with a precision that came not from superior technology, but from pilots who had clearly trained for this exact nightmare 1,000 times before it ever happened. Within 20 minutes, one Varaxi cruiser drifted dead in space, its systems dark. The other two retreated at speeds that bordered on reckless, clearly unwilling to test their luck any further. The Thren Collective, watching the entire engagement from a cautious distance, did not advance. Instead, their formation slowly began to withdraw, retreating back toward the system's edge without a single shot fired. Only the HFY Concorde remained, their ships hanging silently at the outer edge of the system, seemingly reconsidering their approach entirely. "Commander," Sokka said quietly, staring at her display, "the Varaxi Dominion fields some of the most powerful warships in known space. Earth just repelled 3 of their cruisers using technology at least 2 centuries behind our own." Tholis said nothing for a long moment, watching the wreckage drift silently among the stars. He finally understood what that old warning had truly meant. Earth had not been marked as unready because it was weak. It had been marked as unready because it was the kind of world that, once pushed hard enough, simply refused to stop pushing back. "Captain Cho," he said finally, his voice quieter than before, "I believe I understand now why our ancestors chose to leave your world alone. Do you?" Elena's voice carried no triumph, only tired honesty. "Good. Then maybe you'll understand why we're not exactly eager to trust the next fleet that shows up asking for peaceful contact." "What will it take?" Tholis asked, "to earn that trust?" There was a long pause before Elena answered, and when she did, her voice had shifted, quieter, almost vulnerable beneath its exhaustion. "Stay," she said. "Don't retreat. Don't report back to your council, and let them decide what to do with us from somewhere safe. If you actually want to know who we are, Commander, stop watching us from a distance and come see it for yourself." Tholis looked at Durin, then at Sokka, both of them waiting silently for his decision. Behind them, the wreckage of a Varaxi cruiser still drifted in the dark, a silent testament to exactly what kind of world had just woken up after 2 centuries of being ignored. "Set a course," Tholis said finally. "We're going in." The Ashen Veil dropped out of its final approach vector and entered orbit around Earth for the first time in 200 years. Tholis Rem stood at the viewport, staring down at the blue and green world below, half expecting to feel triumphant. Instead, he felt something closer to humility. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful. Clouds drifted lazily across oceans. Continents stretched out in quiet greens and browns. Nothing about the view suggested a species capable of driving off a Varaxi war fleet with little more than scrap metal and stubborn determination. That, Tholis thought, was perhaps the most dangerous thing about humans. They did not look like what they truly were until it was too late to underestimate them safely. "Commander," Sokka said from her station, "Captain Cho is requesting a direct meeting. In person. She's sending coordinates for a landing zone." Tholis raised an eyebrow. "She wants us to come down to the surface?" "That's what it says." Durin frowned deeply. "Commander, that could easily be a trap. We know almost nothing about their ground defenses. After what we just watched them do in orbit," Tholis said, "I suspect their ground defenses are the least of our concerns." He paused, studying the coordinates. "Prepare a shuttle. Small escort only. I want to show them we trust this meeting, not that we fear it." The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere alongside 2 smaller human craft acting as guides, weathered old machines that rattled slightly with turbulence, but never once faltered. Tholis watched the landscape rise up to meet them. Forests, rivers, and finally a wide open field where a modest gathering waited. There was no grand formation of soldiers, no elaborate ceremony. Just a small group of humans standing near a simple landing platform, led by a woman with sharp eyes and a posture that radiated quiet, weathered confidence. Tholis recognized her voice the moment she spoke, even before introductions were made. "Commander Tholis Rem," Elena Cho said, extending a hand in a gesture Tholis had only read about in old cultural files. "Welcome to Earth." Try not to look too surprised. We don't have laser cannons pointed at your ship. The least studied her hand for a moment before understanding the gesture and clasping it carefully in his own. Captain Cho, I admit, after what I witnessed in orbit, I expected something considerably more heavily fortified. We save the fortifications for people who actually threaten us. Elena's mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile. You came down unarmed and asked for a meeting instead of demanding one. That counts for something. They walked together toward a modest structure at the edge of the field, a building that looked functional rather than impressive, filled with humans working at various stations, monitoring screens, coordinating repairs to the same patchwork ships the Elise had first detected days earlier. Nothing here was polished or perfect. Everything looked used, repaired, and stubbornly kept running far past what any Caldrian engineer would consider its natural lifespan. You asked me once what it would take to earn our trust, Elena said, leading him past a wall covered in old photographs, faces of humans who had clearly given their lives defending this small, forgotten world. Well, Commander, here's the honest answer. It's not going to happen in one meeting, or one gesture, or one nicely worded apology. Trust like that takes time. Real time, not diplomatic time. I understand, the Elise said, and found, somewhat to his surprise, that he genuinely meant it. Good. Elena stopped in front of a large window overlooking a vast hangar, where dozens of ships in various states of repair sat side by side, some barely holding together, others clearly newer, built with hard-earned lessons from centuries of struggle. Because here's what we've decided. After watching your council's old files, after fighting off the Varaxi twice now, after 200 years of being told we weren't ready for the rest of the galaxy. She turned to face him fully, her expression steady and unflinching. We're not interested in being anyone's forgotten experiment anymore. Not the Caldrian Unions. Not the Varaxi Dominions. Not anyone's. If the galaxy wants to know Earth, it's going to know us as equals, standing on our own, not as some pitiful project someone finally decided to check in on. The Elise considered her words carefully before responding. The Caldrian Union has made mistakes regarding your world. I cannot undo 2 centuries of neglect with a single conversation. But I can promise you this, Captain Cho. I will report exactly what I witnessed here, without exaggeration and without omission. Your people did not fight like the desperate, unstable species our old files described. You fought like a people who had simply run out of patience for being underestimated. For the first time since their conversation began, Elena's guarded expression softened slightly. That's a start, Commander. A good one. Outside, the sun began to set over the hangar, casting long shadows across the rows of battered, resilient ships that had somehow carried humanity through 200 years of silence, war, and quiet, determined growth. The Elise found himself studying the scene with newfound respect, understanding at last why his ancestors' old warning had been so carefully worded. Do not disturb what sleeps on the third planet. It had never been a warning about weakness. It had always been a warning about exactly what might happen the day this world finally woke up. Days later, as the Ashen Veil prepared to depart Earth's system, the Elise stood once more at the viewport, watching the small blue world shrink slowly behind them. Sokka approached quietly, standing beside him. Commander, the Council will want a full report immediately. How do you intend to describe what happened here? The Elise considered the question for a long moment. Thinking of Elena Cho's tired eyes, the scarred, patchwork ships that refused to stop flying, and the quiet, unbreakable resolve of an entire species that had spent 2 centuries proving they never needed anyone's permission to survive. Tell them, he said finally, that the galaxy just found something far more dangerous than a weapon, or an empire, or a fleet. He turned back toward the viewport, watching Earth disappear into the vast darkness of space. Tell them the galaxy just found a people who refuse to stay down, no matter how many times they get pushed. And tell them, he added quietly, that whatever happens next, we would be wise never to forget it again. Behind them, Earth continued its slow, steady orbit, quiet and unassuming from a distance, exactly as it had always appeared to those who never bothered to look closely enough. But somewhere far across the galaxy, word was already spreading among distant empires and cautious councils alike, whispered in briefing rooms and war councils in equal measure. Humanity was awake, and this time, the galaxy would be watching very, very carefully.